Dun, 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 dun. Cha cha cha. Hello and welcome to Ellroy Reads, which you will be relieved to hear is a book show, not a dance show. But on today's episode, I will be covering probably the most disturbing novel about dance ever written, which is They Shoot Horses, Don't They? By Horace McCoy. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar with Ellroy Reads, this is a show where every week I look at a book that was influential to James Ellroy, a book that moved him, inspired him, thrilled him, amused him. And They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Was a hugely influential book to him personally, but also it has been massively influential on the hardboiled school of writing, noir fiction, existentialist philosophy in France. And to give you a bit of background, Horace McCoy was born in Tennessee at the tail end of the 19th century. He served in the US Army Air Corps in World War One, and he was actually decorated for heroism by the government of France. After the war, he was an ambitious man. He pursued a number of career opportunities. He moved to Dallas and he worked as a journalist. He also began acting in the theatre, and he was actually quite successful. He bagged a number of lead roles in plays in the Dallas theatre scene. Then he moved to Hollywood to try his luck as a film actor. And he did act in a number of pictures, but he soon switched to screenwriting. And he was also making waves by having stories published in pulp magazines as part of the pulp magazine boom. He was very much a man of his time in that he took advantage of things like the pulp magazine boom. But for his debut novel, he wrote a scathing. They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Was his first novel, and it is a scathing attack on the dance marathon craze that was sweeping Depression-era America at the time. So McCoy got the idea when he was working as a bouncer at a Santa Monica pier, and he would see people come and go for the dance marathons. To give you some background, dance marathons are relatively rare today, but they took off in the early 20th century, apparently after interest in the United States picked up for feats of endurance and tests of strength stemming from interest in the Olympic Games, according to some scholars. The rules of the dance marathon were that you had to dance for 45 minutes at a time, you take a 10-minute break, and then you dance for another 45 minutes. And hundreds of people would do this at a time. There'd be elimination contests, and couples would drop out. It was actually very cheap, exploitative entertainment. It was very easy to stage. There was because it was the Depression. There was very little money to stage anything else, and it was cheap for spectators to go. And it proved the most popular entertainment for much of the 1930s. But McCoy was kind of horrified by it because there were stories of people breaking down mentally, physically, and it was just generally exploitative of both the contestants, but also in some ways brought out the worst in the spectators too. And it really brought out the worst in human nature at its kind of lowest point. So They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Tells the story of Robert and Gloria. They meet after they've just been rejected for extra work in a movie. Robert has grand plans. He wants to be a film director. Gloria is more outwardly troubled, and she talks about her suicidal instincts pretty much in every scene. She's clearly a depressive character. But the story is intercut between two events. It begins, and this is not so much a spoiler, right, because this is the beginning, is Robert is being convicted of Gloria's shooting. And we alternate between the judge's sentencing remarks, which in the text get bigger and bigger and bigger, and more damning as a consequence, and flashing back to the dance marathons and everything that goes on there. And we see from the beginning that the way that the dance marathon is run, they go in. Gloria persuades Robert to do a dance marathon because there's we've got no chance in Hollywood just yet. Before the next auditions, let's do this. There'll be some, cheap and easy money. And he says yes, and that's obviously a decision he's going to regret for the rest of his life, because right from the beginning we see how exploitative it is. The police come and arrest a man from Chicago who's committed a murder, and the organizers exploit it for publicity purposes. A wedding is very, very hastily staged to bring in more crowds, even though that this couple is not well suited to marriage, and the whole thing is completely set up. There's no sincerity in it whatsoever. There's a male partner who's stopping his female partner from getting an abortion. There's just lots and lots of things going on in terms of both on the dance floor, in terms of the elimination contests, and the efforts to drum up publicity, but the relationship between Gloria and the MC, who's probably like this head honcho gangster who's running these things. And it's a short novel, and again, that was part of the pulp boom, that the novels would be very short, and McCoy wasn't paid much for this novel. And Ellroy has spoken of how he kind of admires that in McCoy, in that there was very little money involved, but from that, great art has tended to grow. The novel wasn't an instant success, although 90, nearly 100 years on, it's still in print, has continuously been in print. In the United States, it was only a muted success. In France, it really took off. It wasn't even translated until after World War II, but there were copies distributed in kind of, the salons, and it became a very, very important text in the development of existentialist philosophy, to be referred to, but also in the development of film noir and the French noir scene, and how that was very influenced by France's fascination with all things American. McCoy didn't write a book that was ever quite as influential as this one. Again, he only wrote a handful of novels, but some of them are really, really good. I Should Have Stayed Home is good. Kiss Tomorrow is very, very good, and that inspired, that was adapted into film with James Cagney during the kind of classic noir phrase. This was also adapted into a very famous film, and the film, I'm happy to say, is very, very good. I should point out firstly that McCoy continued his successful career in Hollywood as a screenwriter. He died, sadly, of a heart attack aged only 58 in the late 1950s. Then, several years after, more than 10 years after his death, in 1969 came the Oscar-winning film adaptation of They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Directed by Sidney Pollack and starring Jane Fonda and a Canadian actor called Michael Sarrazin in the lead roles as Robert and Gloria. And I'm happy to say it's really, really good. It kind of makes the story feel more kind of epic than this story is, which is the kind of naturally concise, almost like you get the sense that there's a kind of philosophy behind it, because it almost feels like an afterthought. It feels just like it really conjures up the images of these kind of smoke-filled dance halls, and just the stench, the sweat on the back of your neck, just the aggravation of being around these same people, 20 hours a day. The lack of food, the lack of nutrition begins to affect the lead characters, and then we begin to realize why it got to the stage that Gloria is killed. The film fleshes this out quite a lot to more epic length, and it does a really good job, because if you haven't read the story, you might be curious about the title, because you almost certainly have heard the title. It's one of the all-time great titles, and the way you can tell that is because it's been parodied so much. They shoot horses, don't they? You'll have heard that, someone say that in an expression, but it's been parodied by Black Dahlia research Pew Eatwell, who wrote a book about moving to Paris called They Eat Horses, Don't They? An episode of Arrested Development where Tom Jane is playing a heroin addict in a film called They Shoot Horse, Don't They? And endlessly in songs, in film and TV, it actually refers to an incident from Robert's past where the beloved family horse has to be put down. And the way that's worked into the story is absolutely brilliant. In the film, they work into the story much more closely from the beginning, and we see that this is a trauma affecting the characters very, very much from the beginning. But the way it's kind of classic noir, the way it finally comes back, they shoot horses, don't they? It comes, it's a split second, and then it goes, and it just haunts you. Um, and now it's passed into the national lexicon. The film is really, really good. It was nominated for many Oscars. I think the only winner was actually Gig Young, who played the MC. And again, that's another part that's actually really fleshed out in the film. And we get to know a lot more about how this MC is thinking. Gig Young was a very fine actor. He was also a very troubled man. He was married 5 times, and he died only a few years after the film They Shoot Horses Don't They came out, in a murder-suicide with his German wife who'd only been married for 3 weeks. In the film, he keeps repeating this phrase, "Yowza, yowza, ladies and gentlemen, yowza, yowza, yowza," and it's kind of repeated ad nauseum until it is just in your head, and you'll be saying to yourself, "Yowza," again and again and again. But that's, I think, the beauty of this story is, like, there are very few other stories like this. And can you think of many films which feature a dance marathon? I can't. I think there's one in Heaven's Gate, because that was a Notorious Turkey. But it's a very original story. It works its way into your mind, both in terms of the dialogue, the characters. You'll be thinking about them for weeks, if not months afterwards. How it actually influenced James Ellroy. There aren't that many specific links, I suppose, although occasionally in his, he's writing, his period detail is like 10 years after this, at least, because this is a Great Depression novel, whereas Ellroy writes in the classic noir age for Los Angeles, which is the 40s and 50s, which is, of course, boom years economically. The World War II led to a kind of boom war economy for the US, but also the post-war boom, the baby boomers. He is a baby boomer, but also, the development of the US in terms of the construction of the freeway system, the massive urban expansion, home ownership, all these kind of luxury household goods and these things. And of course, he's writing the cost behind that. It's very, very different from a kind of Great Depression setting, although he does occasionally show fads that kind of come and go over his classic era. Ellroy's is 41, so they're Pearl Harbor, the Pearl Harbor attack, through to 63, and the assassination of JFK. Probably one of the more direct influences, though, is the cross-cutting between the sentencing remarks and the action. That's a big influence on James Ellroy, because we see that in Ellroy's fiction all the time, although he'll probably show hush-hush magazine articles, newspaper headlines, FBI transcripts, police reports, all manner of documentation and kind of document inserts throughout his text. And then we get the main narrative where you see the two stories colliding, we see contradictions between the two main events, or in some cases the two stories kind of complement each other. But it's all telling the story, and it's all using new techniques to tell the story. But really, this is kind of classic storytelling on its purest level, and I can't recommend it highly enough. Do get the book. You can read the book in a day. In fact, you can probably read it in a couple of hours. And, I'm very much in favor of that. I'm in favor of, novellas and great short stories. I think that it's long overdue for a comeback as publishing goes through its current trials and tribulations in the internet age. The film is also exceptionally good, and it's one of the few film adaptations. It might sound churlish to say it betters the book, but it certainly takes some of the material of the book and just excels of it, and in new dramatic levels. So they're both, classic works, and you just can't get better than They Shoot Horses, Don't They? It's just one of the all-time great stories. And I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed this video. Okay, I'll be back next week, sans dancing, for another episode of Ellroy Reads. Thank you. Bye-bye.